I should have known that touching alien technology would change everything. But when you're staring at a machine that's been frozen for centuries and your rent is 3 months overdue, you don't exactly have the luxury of caution. My name is Marcus Rivera, and I'm the kind of mechanic who fixes things other people have given up on. Broken transmissions, dead engines, toasters that somehow catch fire when you make bagels. If it's mechanical and allegedly hopeless, it usually ends up in my garage in Nome, Alaska. What I didn't expect was for the government to drag a chunk of ice the size of a city bus into my shop and tell me it contained humanity's first contact with alien life. We need you to make it work, Agent Sarah Chun said, her breath forming clouds in the sub-zero air of my converted hangar. Every other engineer, every scientist, every tech expert we've consulted says it's impossible. The technology is too advanced, too different. But you ... She gestured at the wall of my shop, covered with certificates and photos of impossible repairs. You make the impossible possible. I should have said no. I should have told them to find someone with a PhD in xenarchaeology or whatever the hell you call alien ship repair. Instead, I found myself staring at the most beautiful machine I'd ever seen. Even trapped in its prison of ice, the ship, if you could call it that, was maybe 30 feet long, with curves that seemed to flow like water, frozen mid-splash. Its hull was a deep blue-black that seemed to absorb light, and even through the ice, I could see intricate patterns etched into its surface. It looked organic, like it had been grown rather than built. How long has it been frozen? I asked, running my hand along the ice. Carbon dating suggests approximately 800 years. It was discovered during an oil survey in the Beaufort Sea. The ice core around it is older than the ship itself. Whatever happened, it went down fast and stayed down. 800 years. Before Columbus, before the Renaissance, before humanity even dreamed of reaching the stars, something had crashed into our Arctic waters and been preserved like a bug in amber. And you want me to just ... it on? Agent Chun's expression hardened. 3 days ago, deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures heading toward Earth. 27 objects, each the size of Manhattan, decelerating from near light speed. They'll be here in 72 hours. She paused, letting that sink in. We think this ship might be our only way to communicate with them. 72 hours. Jesus Christ. I spent the next 6 hours with a team of specialists, carefully melting the ice around the ship using heated glycol and industrial hair dryers. It was delicate work. Too much heat, and we might damage whatever was inside. Too little, and we'd be here for weeks. As the ice melted away, more details emerged. The ship's surface wasn't just decorated with patterns. They seemed to be some kind of circuitry, flowing in impossible directions that hurt to look at directly. There, I said, pointing to what looked like a seam running along the ship's side. That's got to be an access panel. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the xenobiologist they'd assigned to the team, shook her head. We've been over every inch of this thing. No visible hatches, no obvious entry points. The hull appears to be seamless. I pulled out my flashlight and knelt beside the ship. The patterns weren't random. They formed a kind of spiral that seemed to converge on specific points. And at those points, the metal, if it was metal, seemed slightly different, almost like it was waiting for something. What if it's not about finding a door? I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. What if it's about asking permission? I pressed my palm against one of the convergence points. The ship came alive. Light raced through the patterns like fire through gasoline. And suddenly the hangar was filled with a sound like singing. Not human singing, but something that resonated in your bones, in your DNA. The seamless hull began to unfold. There's no other word for it. Sections of the ship peeled back like flower petals, revealing an interior that glowed with soft, welcoming light. Holy shit, someone whispered behind me. The interior was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls curved organically, covered in the same flowing patterns that now pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. There were no right angles, no harsh edges. Everything flowed into everything, else like it had been carved from a single piece of living crystal. And in the center of it all was a chair, or maybe a throne. It was clearly designed for something humanoid, but the proportions were wrong. Too tall, too narrow, with what looked like spaces for wings or additional limbs. "Don't touch anything," Agent Chun warned, but I was already moving forward. The moment I stepped inside the ship, the singing grew louder, more complex. The patterns on the walls began to shift and change, forming new configurations. And then, without any conscious decision on my part, I sat down in the chair. The universe exploded into my mind. I was flying through space at impossible speeds, watching stars wheel past like streetlights. I was part of a vast fleet, thousands of ships like this one, all connected in a network of minds and memories that stretched across the galaxy. And I was dying, not me, the ship's pilot. I could feel its terror, its desperate need to warn its people about something terrible approaching from the darkness between stars, something that consumed entire civilizations, that turned their own technology against them. The DEVOURERS dot, the vision faded, leaving me gasping in the chair. But the ship's systems were still active, still connected to my mind. I could feel its databases, its navigation systems, its weapons, and most importantly, I could feel its communications array. "Marcus," Agent Chun's voice seemed to come from very far away. "The objects in space, they're changing course. They're coming faster." I could see them now through the ship's sensors. They weren't ships, they were something else. Something that looked like a cross between a mechanical spider and a cancer cell. They moved through space by consuming it, leaving trails of absolute nothing in their wake. "I know what they are," I said, my voice strange in my own ears. "The pilot of this ship died, trying to warn someone about them. They're called the Devourers, and they've been hunting the ship's species for millennia. Can you contact them? The approaching fleet?" I reached out with the ship's communication system, sending a broad-spectrum signal toward the approaching objects. The response was immediate and terrifying. Not words, but pure hunger. They had detected the ship's awakening, and they were coming to finish what they'd started 800 years ago. But there was something else in their signal, something that made my blood run cold. They weren't just coming for the ship. They were coming for Earth, our radio signals, our satellite transmissions. Our entire electromagnetic signature had been painting a target on our world for decades. "They're not here for the ship," I said, standing up from the chair. "They're here for us. We've been broadcasting our location to them for 50 years. The hangar erupted in chaos. Military personnel shouted orders. Scientists frantically took readings, and Agent Chun tried to coordinate response efforts. But I was still connected to the ship, still feeling its alien intelligence mixing with my own. That's when I realized the truth. The ship's pilot hadn't died in the crash. It had sacrificed itself, using its own life force to keep the ship's systems in stasis, waiting for someone who could understand its technology, someone who could think in 3 dimensions about 4-dimensional problems, who could see patterns in chaos and find connections where none seemed to exist. A human mechanic. "I can fly it," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "The ship, it's been waiting for someone who thinks like I do, someone who can see how things fit together." Agent Chun stared at me. "You're talking about taking an alien ship into combat against a force that destroyed its entire civilization." "No," I said, the ship's knowledge flowing through me like electricity. "I'm talking about using human ingenuity to solve a problem that alien perfection couldn't handle." The ship's previous pilot had been part of a hive mind, a collective consciousness that thought in harmony and consensus. Beautiful, but predictable. The Devourers had evolved to counter that kind of thinking, to anticipate and neutralize coordinated responses. But humans, we were chaos. We were improvisation and intuition, and the kind of stupid courage that makes you touch an alien machine because your rent is overdue. We were everything the Devourers had never encountered. "Get everyone out of the hangar," I said, settling back into the pilot's chair. "I'm going to introduce our visitors to human problem-solving." The ship lifted off with a grace that made my heart sing. It wasn't like flying an airplane or even a spacecraft. It was like becoming one with the sky itself. The alien technology interfaced with my nervous system, making the ship an extension of my body, my thoughts, my will. I burst out of the hangar and into the Arctic night, accelerating toward the edge of Earth's atmosphere. Behind me, I could feel the ship's communication array broadcasting on every frequency, sending a message to every human facility on Earth. "This is Marcus Rivera. currently piloting humanity's first alien spacecraft. If you're receiving this, you're about to witness either the most spectacular rescue in human history or the most expensive failure. Either way, it's going to be interesting. The Devourers were already in the outer system, their forms visible as dark tears in the fabric of space. They moved like a swarm, but there was an intelligence to their formation. It spoke of eons of experience consuming civilizations. I reached out with the ship's sensors, trying to understand their movement patterns. They were converging on Earth from multiple vectors, their approach calculated to eliminate any possibility of escape or effective resistance. Perfect tactics for fighting a conventional enemy. But I wasn't conventional. I was a mechanic from Nome, Alaska, who had spent 20 years fixing things that couldn't be fixed by thinking about them the way everyone else thought about them. I dove toward the nearest devourer, the ship's weapon systems coming online. The alien technology was incredible. Energy weapons that could cut through matter at the molecular level. Defensive shields that could deflect planet-killing asteroids. But the Devourers had seen all of this before. They adapted instantly, their forms shifting to absorb the energy weapons, their own attacks probing for weaknesses in the shields. That's when I did something the ship's original pilot never would have considered. I rammed the bastard. The Devourer's form shattered like glass, its consumed mass spraying into the void. The ship's hull rang like a bell, but the alien technology held. More importantly, the other Devourers paused, their advanced stuttering as they tried to process what had just happened. You don't know what to do with crazy, do you? I muttered, pulling the ship into a tight spiral around another Devourer. You've spent 1,000,000 years fighting logical, predictable enemies. But humans? We're the species that looked at fire and thought, I wonder what happens if I stick my hand in it. I opened the ship's communication array again, broadcasting on every frequency the Devourers were using. But instead of words, I sent them something that had never existed in their experience. Human music. Specifically, I sent them Thunderstruck by a CDC. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourers' coordination collapsed as their collective consciousness tried to process the chaotic, illogical beauty of human art. They began to scatter, their formations breaking apart as they struggled to understand what they were experiencing. That's when I realized the truth about the Devourers. They weren't just predators. They were a kind of cosmic immune system, evolved to eliminate civilizations that had become too predictable, too perfect, too stagnant. They were the universe's way of preventing stagnation. But humanity wasn't stagnant. We were chaos made flesh, creativity incarnate, the universe's own improvisational jazz ensemble. We were exactly the kind of unpredictable, adaptive species that could not only survive the Devourers, but teach them something new. I reached out with the ship's communication array one more time, but this time I wasn't broadcasting to the Devourers. I was broadcasting to every human on Earth, every satellite, every radio telescope, every communication device that could reach into space. This is Marcus Rivera, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the planet. I need everyone on Earth to do something for me. I need you to be human. And then I told them what I needed. 15 minutes later, the Devourers encountered something that had never existed in their billion-year history, a planet-wide expression of human creativity. Every radio station on Earth began broadcasting music, not coordinated, not organized, just the beautiful chaos of human artistic expression. Rock and roll, classical, jazz, folk songs, rap, heavy metal, country, pop, traditional music from every culture that had ever existed. The Devourers stopped. For the first time in their existence, they encountered something they couldn't consume, couldn't predict, couldn't counter. They encountered the human spirit dot, and slowly, incredibly, they began to sing along. The sound that emerged from the Devourers wasn't the hunger I'd felt before. It was wonder. It was curiosity. It was the sound of a force of nature, discovering that it could be something more than just destruction. One by one, the Devourers began to change. Their forms shifted from the angular, consuming shapes they'd worn for eons to something more organic, more creative. They began to create instead of destroy, to build instead of consume. And in that moment, I realized what the ship's pilot had really been trying to tell me. The Devourers weren't evil. They were just incomplete. They were a part of the universe's ecosystem, that had forgotten how to grow, how to create, how to dream. They'd been waiting for a species chaotic enough, creative enough, human enough to remind them. I guided the ship back toward Earth, where the Devourers were now orbiting peacefully, their forms continuing to evolve into something beautiful and strange. They were learning, growing, becoming something new. Control, this is Marcus Rivera, I said into the communication array. Mission accomplished. The Devourers have been, I guess you could say they've been civilized. They're not a threat anymore. There, I paused, watching as one of the transformed beings began to paint patterns of light across the asteroid belt. They're artists now. As I descended toward Earth, I could feel the ship's systems beginning to power down. The alien technology had served its purpose, bridging the gap between human and cosmic consciousness. But it was time for it to rest again, to wait for the next impossible problem that would require the unique combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. I landed the ship back in the hangar, and as I stepped out of the pilot's chair, I felt the connection fade. The ship's hull sealed itself, the patterns dimming to a gentle glow, but I could still feel it, waiting, ready for the next time humanity needed to punch above its weight class. Agent Shun was waiting for me, along with what looked like half the government of the free world. Mr. Rivera, she said, I think we need to discuss your new job description. I looked back at the ship, then at the night sky, where the transformed Devourers were creating works of art that would be visible from Earth for generations. I'm still a mechanic, I said. I just fix bigger things now. Outside, the first light of dawn was beginning to show on the horizon. But it wasn't just the dawn of a new day. It was the dawn of a new age. An age where humanity had proven that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to approach it with a kind of beautiful, chaotic, completely human logic that turns enemies into artists and threats into opportunities. The ship hummed quietly behind me, its patterns pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Devourers continued their transformation, learning to create instead of consume, to dream instead of destroy, all because a mechanic from Nome, Alaska, had decided to fix something that everyone else said was impossible. But then again, that's what we humans do best. We look at the impossible and say, hold my beer. And sometimes, just sometimes, we make the universe a little more beautiful in the process. The transformed Devourers would go on to become humanity's greatest allies, helping us spread not just across the galaxy, but across dimensions of creativity and possibility we'd never imagined. They became the universe's gardeners, nurturing new forms of life and consciousness wherever they went. And it all started because a down-on-his-luck mechanic was willing to touch something he didn't understand, to sit in a chair that wasn't meant for him, and to solve a problem with the kind of beautiful, chaotic, completely human approach that turns the impossible into the inevitable. The ship still sits in that hangar in Nome, waiting for the next impossible problem that will require the unique combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. And I'm still its pilot, still ready to fix whatever the universe throws at us next, because that's what we do. We are humans. We don't just survive. We make the universe a better place, one impossible repair at a time. The dawn broke fully over the Arctic, and I realized that I was looking at more than just a new day. I was looking at the first sunrise of humanity's true place in the cosmos, not as conquerors or victims, but as the universe's own repair crew, fixing problems that no one else could solve, with a kind of beautiful, chaotic logic that only we possessed. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Devourers continued their transformation, painting wonders across the void that would inspire generations of humans to reach for the stars and ask, what impossible thing can we fix today? The answer, as always, was everything.